Welcome back to the Baymobile channel. I am super excited today to share with you how I became a millionaire at 25. But even more so, if you're in your 20s, I would love to share with you principles that I think would be super helpful for you to achieve your first million as well. So actually behind me is the Huracan, and if you're new to this channel, you should know that I love cars, and this is the third Lambo that I bought. I'm actually currently 28 years old, and I've owned a couple of businesses, one of which reached an 8-figure valuation. I've also done real estate investing, and I used to work in tech as a software engineer. So the car is definitely not going to be the topic of this video today. However, it is a quick preview into the next video that I want to make to reveal the wrap and some of the other ideas that I have for the car. But without further ado, let's get into the lessons. I think it's very important to get some concepts and terms defined first before we dive into this. So the measurement of your wealth should be defined by the term of your net worth, which is not simply cash in your bank account. It is actually your assets minus your liabilities. If you actually have about $1 million cash in your bank, I would be very, very skeptical as to how you achieved that, because wealth accumulation is done through investments, business, or assets, or things that are not super liquid or cash translatable. Secondly, anyone can become a millionaire. I think that it's very, very easy with the right spending and saving habits by the time you retire. Because I was able to achieve this in 3 years from the ages of 22 to 25, there are certain principles and strategies that I think can help you tremendously be able to achieve that $1 million net worth in a short period of time. Quick disclaimer, I am not a financial advisor. I also don't have anything specific as far as things that you should do, like day trading, that will get you to that $1 million. These are all fundamental mindset principles that I strongly advise for you to adopt for yourself in order to get to the state of mind that will help you achieve wealth. Lastly, if you're in your 20s, this advice would be very, very suitable for you because you have time, energy, and no responsibilities in your hand relative to if you are older. We find our spouse, we get married, we have to take care of children, and those responsibilities, they cannot be focused on yourself and how you're going to be able to achieve a higher net worth. $1 million, $83,000 a month, $2,700 a day, or $114 per hour, assuming you're working 24/7, is not a good way to measure how you're going to make your first $1 million. First principle, do not trade the long term for short-term gains. I've seen way too many people forego a 4-year college education to pursue a blue-collar job that pays them $50,000, $60,000 a year. And yes, you don't accumulate debt from tuition. And yes, you might be able to make that $200,000 in that 4 years. However, do not discredit the power of accumulation of knowledge that will help compound your net worth. The execution of wealth accumulation is not linear. You do have to rely on the idea of compounding through exponential growth. Through the long-term sacrifice, many people try to chase that year to year, month to month, day to day gain in that cash in your bank account. And it is very, very difficult to be able to do that without a skill set or the power of leverage. Yes, you can still make that $1 million. However, you would then have to be very strategic as to how to invest and grow your money, because money in itself accumulating through the exchange of your labor and your time is not going to be enough to make $1 million in a short time. I've seen way too many people pay for courses with the idea of fast tracking your way to making money. Although it's entirely possible, it is improbable, just because the idea of executing on a skill set to achieve such a high level of return in money, unless you're at that 0.1% of a top performer, it is very, very unlikely. That is also why day traders, it's a zero-sum game. Most people don't make money, and only the top 1% makes from the 99% that don't. I went to Georgia Tech and I majored in computer science. I actually studied for about 3.5 years, graduated 1 semester early, and make money at my full-time job. However, the importance of education was very crucial to my development, because I wouldn't have had a skill set otherwise to capitalize on had I just worked a job without going to college. Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, those are examples where they come with some passion and skill set, so well versed in that space enough where they don't need college. However, for the typical person like you and me, we do need to find value in the investment of time in exchange for knowledge, which provides so much more value in the long term. I was making about 150,000 a year, which of course in about 2 year time frame, that would be more than working a 50 to 60K job in 4 years just to be able to accumulate that kind of net worth. The long-term value of investing is to buy companies that you believe in and to do it without speculation and doing it for the long term based on value investing. And over a course of many years, especially through the proven performance of an ETF or an index fund, it is guaranteed that you are investing in something that will always grow in value based on, let's say, our US economy and our GDP. Through the compounding of stock value growth, you are also not subject to short-term capital gains tax until you sell, which of course, if you hold for many, many years, that will not be an issue that you have to think about. Let's make sure to not forget about the long term just to pursue that short-term goal. And this transitions into my second topic. Delayed gratification. We are all human beings and we fall victim to the idea of maximizing our dopamine. So dopamine is a chemical messenger and a hormone that essentially gives us this short-term happiness and drive to kind of do something. And oftentimes we sacrifice the long term to chase that short-term dopamine rush. Idea of delayed gratification comes from being okay with withstanding hardship for an extended amount of time in order to achieve success later in the future. There's actually studies done on the correlation between people who have a high tolerance with delayed gratification and their ability to succeed. When I first moved to Seattle, I started working, of course, at Amazon, and I pursued a master's degree in computer science. Alongside those two, I actually did not really care as far as the quality of food that I was eating. I actually rented a cheap apartment for $700 a month while I was studying for my master's and working at Amazon. It was not the most fun. However, because I had such a pure obsession for the goal of making that $1 million in mind, I was okay with the idea of working for only 3 years to set up the rest of my life. Just imagine 3 years of sacrifice to set up the rest of your life for success. That to me is a much, much higher dose of dopamine with the idea of delayed gratification. Some examples that I've seen peers around me fall into, gaming specifically, and it's based on a reward system where you can achieve these things very, very quickly. If you played like an RPG game, you will understand that maximizing a skill set or be able to buy certain items are shortened such tremendously to a length where you can achieve it in minutes, where if you try to correlate these things to real life, it takes much, much longer. But the idea of this reward system, if you can understand it psychologically, you can also exploit that for your success. Have a goal in mind and stick to it. You should have a long-term goal, a midterm, and a short-term goal. And once you define your long-term goal, it has to be aligned with your values and why you want to achieve it. Then you can reverse engineer it to then plan out the steps and the years, the months and the days to slowly advance towards it. Oftentimes I see peers around me that don't really have a direction for what they're doing. They live on a day by day and just enjoying life, which is not an issue, by the way, but only if you're trying to achieve such a high net worth in a short amount of time. You have to be strategic about how you are using your time. For me, when I first moved to Seattle, I was very particular about what I wanted to do with my life in 3 years. And that was, I did not want to work a corporate job. I also wanted to achieve a net worth where I can buy certain things that I wanted. Of course, the Lambos in my life. And I also wanted to build a lifestyle for myself where I could have complete autonomy over the usage of my time. So based on my Amazon salary alone in year one, I was making about $150,000. Post-tax, that only comes out to be about $105,000. Of course, with my rent, about $8,400. My car payments, a little bit hefty, $30,000. Food, $10,000. Just like random entertainment, clothes, medical bills, about $5,000. I am only left with about $50,000 of discretionary spending, which of course I poured straight into investments. If you were to look at my long-term goal, if I wanted to become a millionaire, and if I was only able to save $50,000 from my Amazon job alone, in 3 years, I would have only accumulated $150K, which in no way would have been possible without being strategic about what I'm going to be doing with my time. I looked at a couple of deficiencies in what I'm doing with my time. First of all, I wanted to maximize my knowledge. So even though I'm working at Amazon and exchanging my time for money, I'm actively being promoted in my company and climbing the corporate ladder first. Secondly, pursuing a master's on the side and being able to specialize deeper into the skill sets to then capitalize on that in the future, as well as picking up 2 other jobs, one as a pianist and the other as a TA for a master's course that I took. Both of my TA and church jobs were able to subsidize my living costs completely while then saving 100% of my Amazon income and then investing all that into real estate. So with that goal and reverse engineering it, I was able to find specific outlets where I had a vested interest in learning more about, which is real estate, to be able to multiply my net worth. Real estate is something that's very specific to me. However, these principles can be applied to anything that you are interested in as long as you are strategic about your time. The last part about goal setting is that while it's good to have a goal, you also need to build an obsession towards it, which means that as you reverse engineer this and plan out your day-by-day activities, you do need to stick to this as if you are obsessed with something. It's very, very hard to obsess over a 3-year, 5-year time frame. However, if you define your purpose, that will allow you to structure your days to make sure that whatever you're doing, you are advancing closer to that long-term goal. When I look back at the things that I've done, it's very, very easy to piece together and connect the dots, and it all makes sense based on the economy, based on my decisions. However, the most important parts are the challenges that I faced while pursuing that at that time, not knowing what the future holds, right? So these fundamental principles are here to guide you in order to face the challenges that you're facing now, as opposed to strictly following the exact path that I took. And that's not possible because the real estate market has changed. The job market has changed. So hopefully you find that these principles are applicable to the things that you do now, and hopefully will help you achieve $1 million very, very quickly. Transitioning to the next topic, systemize your life. It's actually based on a book that I read, Thinking Fast and Slow. The author categorizes every action that we do in life into 2 topics, System 1 and System 2. System 2 is defined by the idea of active mental cognition, where things that we are learning, things that we are getting into that's new, is based on having to actively pay attention to what we're doing. System 1 is based on intuition, which is based on muscle memory, which is also based on things that we are used to and are able to do intuitively. The best example I can give you is if you can recall the first time you learned how to drive a car, we had to pay attention to the throttle response based on the pedal. We also had to pay attention to how far the car would turn based on the rotating angle of the steering wheel. Because we're sitting on the left side of the car, what is the approximated distance between the right side of the car and the curb? As you practice more and more, these things become intuition. So while we learn to drive initially by using System 2, eventually that becomes System 1. Now imagine you set your long-term goal and you reverse engineer that on a day-by-day basis and what you're going to be doing with your time. This is particularly important as you build the habits to System 1, things that are important to advancing you further towards that goal by utilizing System 2 as necessary. I wanted to make sure that none of my time was wasted. And that also includes driving to and from work, especially in Seattle traffic. I lost about an hour a day just sitting in traffic. So I made sure that as I'm driving, I always had to be learning through listening to podcasts or audiobooks. Just an hour a day of System 1ing, driving, and System 2ing, listening to podcasts. I was able to maximize my learning when I'm not working. There are other ways to maximize your life, and that is something that you need to decide how to System 1 and build that habit and intuition so you can couple that with System 2 things where even if you could potentially overlap the 2, that would be ideal, or if not, to pay attention to what's important to you. Because at the end of the day, we do have a mental energy capacity. There's a reason why Steve Jobs had the same jeans and t-shirt outfit for every day of the week, because he did not want to allocate any of his System 2 energy towards thinking about what he has to wear and allocating all 100% of that System 2 energy into growing a business. So be proactive about how you're using your time and be cognizant about the quality use of your time. Environmental scarcity. This term in itself might be just a little convoluted, but I'm here to explain. Oftentimes, as we try to make money, we also look at decreasing our expenses. By decreasing expenses, ultimately, we do allocate more money to spending or investing or using it to some degree of wealth generation. However, doing so, especially through the idea of budgeting, may not be the optimal approach. Budgeting is the idea that for each category in our life, dining, food, entertainment, we set a cap in our spending. For instance, let's say $500 a month on food. Of course, we are alerted when we go past this allocated budget. But if we underspend, let's say $300 for the month for food, that $200 surplus is oftentimes then used up in that category to satisfy our budget cap. That is not the most useful if you're trying to maximize saving money. So the idea of environmental scarcity is when you receive that paycheck, set aside 90% of it and act as if you only have 10% of your income and survive with that alone. That will challenge you to spend things that provide value to you and only value. Do you really need to buy this piece of clothing just because you like it? Do you really need to buy this car just because it drives a little faster? Think about it. At least for me, when I first came to Seattle, environmental scarcity helped tremendously build my net worth as I only spent my money on things that accelerated me towards my goal, which was not in clothes, not in my living condition, not in fancy fine dining food, pure macros and nutrition for food, a living condition enough where my safety is not compromised, and to be able to go out when I know that there's value in connecting with friends around me. When you're also particular about how you're exchanging this expenditure of your money for the value that it brings, that will surpass the impact that budgeting will have otherwise. Now, don't confuse this with the idea of sacrificing long-term for short-term, because oftentimes, actually, we lose out on the idea of hidden values that we're not perceiving. For instance, perhaps there's no value in going to a fine dining restaurant because we're trying to save money. However, if you're going out with a friend, the value of that friendship might be invaluable to the cost of an extra $30 to $40 because you're buying a nice steak. So let's also make sure that you're not losing picture of the long-term value based on some of these short-term savings you're trying to do. The next principle that I want to talk about is be a contrarian. For the typical average American, we are expected to go to college for 4 years, and as we graduate, we get a job, and we usually work in this field for 20, 30 years until we retire. This system is designed because we need a labor force in our market. When I say be a contrarian, you do have to question the systems that we are being subjected to, and how do we surpass this? We live in a capitalistic nation, and there are things that can be exploited for your own benefit. I have tons of friends who have been in corporate for many years, and we call it the golden handcuffs because they're making way over 6 figures, and it's a very comfortable lifestyle. And yes, they are being in that position where they're exchanging their time for money. However, there are also other concepts of exchanging time for knowledge, exchanging knowledge for money, and then exchanging money for money. These 3 other principles are not so evident when you are subjected to just working in corporate and exchanging purely time for money. So as you're working your job, and this is assuming that you did graduate from college and you are working at a job, consider whether this is the right path for you. If you enjoy your job, that is perfectly fine. Doing things that we're passionate about is one of the most fulfilling things in life. However, if you're not happy about your job, consider how to specialize in a skill set and how to invest your time into things that will bring more value. I met a very impactful person in my life who changed my view on the idea of complacency. So in the context of this contrarian approach, we fall into this idea that if we get this good job, the golden handcuffs, we become complacent in making that very stable 6-figure salary. And our idea of taking risks become, how do I take a risk for the potential of making a lot of money in the future to now I'm making a lot of money, and how do I save the money and not lose it? So this is a very common mindset shift when you start making things, because you actually have things to lose. Let's also make sure not to lose track of the risk tolerance equivalent to when you had nothing to lose, because the risk behind it might not be indicative of the potential value in the gain that you can achieve to accelerate your growth. There's a saying that a weak man loses value when you provide him consistent sex and cheap entertainment. This then again falls into all the things that I've mentioned so far about delayed gratification and wanting to seek that instant dopamine rush while at the same time being complacent with the high figure salary that you're making, which of course will not be anywhere close to advancing you further towards making that 1 million in a very short time frame. So be very consciously aware of how your psychological mindset is shifting as you are experiencing all these inputs into your life, to be very particularly conscious about the actions and time and how you're using your money to accelerate your growth. I do now want to talk about some of the decisions that I made during my second year of working. And this is very particularly important because I was entering kind of an uncomfortable zone, especially when it comes to real estate, being a little uncertain about the future economics. I did buy an additional 4 houses. And if you haven't seen my video on how I bought my first Lambo, you should check that out right here in the link, because I did buy 2 houses in the first year and I did explain the finances behind that in that video. So by the end of year 2, I did accumulate 6 rental properties along with 3 W-2 jobs and being able to maximize my income while saving on my expenses. This then leads to my next point. Debt is not always bad. In fact, a lot of people think that debt is very scary when it comes to credit card debt, but credit card debt is not the same as mortgage debt, which is also not the same as auto loan debt. Credit card debt is not particularly good because the APR in credit card loans, percentage-wise, is in their 20s. Most people don't pay off their debt, and as debt starts to accrue, they aren't conscious of how much they have in their checkings. I know that people sometimes are even afraid to look at their checkings account. So of course, as debt accrues, you are technically borrowing at a level where your net worth becomes negative. Student loan debt is the same thing. However, debt can be leveraged. And I'll give you an example. The first house that I bought in my year 1, 2018, when I was 22, I bought it for $105,000 with a 20% down payment, including closing costs, comes out to be about $25,000. 3 years from the purchase date, that house appreciated $70,000 based on my $25,000 initial investment. That is more than 100% return. So through debt, I was able to leverage a high value asset and its appreciation with a fraction of its cost. These hidden values in leveraging debt can work in your favor as long as you do your research and weigh out all the risks behind which tangible asset you are investing in. Although I mentioned earlier that auto loan debt is bad, it also depends on the circumstance on how you use it. Although unintentional, I actually made money from my Huracan by leveraging an auto loan. For instance, the third Lambo that I bought back in 2019, I bought for $180,000 with $60,000 down at 3% interest. After COVID hit, the value of that car, and because all used car prices went up, the value of that car went up to $240,000. That is a $60,000 appreciation in the car. Had I sold it in that year, based on my $60,000 down payment, that is a 100% ROI. ROI, which stands for return on investment. However, for most cases for auto loans, cars, they depreciate. So it is not a valid example that you should follow today. However, it's very important for you to understand the concept of leveraging debt. Now, during my second year trying to accumulate this net worth of $1 million, the next principle that really helped me was get out of your comfort zone. I come from a background where I was traumatized by some hardships growing up in my upbringing and the environment that I was in. And because of that, there's always this idea of having to fight against not wanting to feel pain and suffering. So while I say pursue something out of your comfort zone, it is really to simulate this kind of same hardship, to incentivize you to do something proactive. For most people, if you come from a privileged background, there is no reason for you to pursue something that is difficult. The best analogy that I can give is, imagine if you are in a fallen pit and there's a burning ladder for you to climb out of this pit. And what if I tell you that in this pit, there is a cave and it's temperature regulated, so you don't ever have to experience being cold or hot, and it has all the food and all the amenities that you need to be comfortable? What will incentivize you to climb that burning ladder? For most people, there's no reason to. Now, what if I tell you that the same pit is full of lava and you're burning in this lava? The incentive to climbing that burning ladder is no longer an impediment. Climbing that burning ladder is the default option because it is the less of the two in terms of suffering and pain, because one gives the option and chance of success. So going back to reality here and the idea of complacency and the idea of golden handcuffs, how do you simulate an environment where you feel enough suffering and pain and hardship that wanting to pursue something else in life is the default option because you don't have that safety net? Oftentimes, when we don't have anything to lose, then we are incentivized to take risks. So manage your risks and manage the fact that if you are aware you're complacent, then how do you get out of your comfort zone? Some of the things that also come with getting out of your comfort zone, oftentimes we fall victim to our own biases. Meeting people was very difficult for me. I was very socially anxious. Never would I imagine talking to a camera and publicizing this publicly. Because I had no other option and because I wasn't happy with my job, I wanted to network with people and expand my vision. And I met tons of people that had shaped my mindset and people that I've respected who were able to help bring me out of this burning pit. There was this mutual fund manager that I met. His name is Gabe. And while I was only 23 at the time, he was very, very kind to spend a couple hours getting dinner with me. He shared some key principles that helped me make a very important decision in my life, which was to buy a house in Seattle, which of course is one of the houses that I bought in my second year here. What he talked about was the idea of where the first $250,000 of appreciation in your primary residence is not subject to capital gains tax. And in fact, for numbers to be clear, if we look at a $1 million house, if I bought this as my primary residence and appreciated 25%, right? So $1.25 million, I can sell this house and not pay any tax on the appreciation. Now, if I wanted to recycle this money and continue making more, imagine buying a $1.25 million house and to then subject ourselves to the same $250,000 capital gains free tax. That house only needs to appreciate 20% in order to reach that cap. Now, to depict how impactful compounding is, if we bought a $2 million house and for that to appreciate $250,000, that means the house only needs to appreciate 12.5%. Between 2019 and 2020, my house appreciated around $300,000 and is one of the biggest drivers towards that $1 million. Now, the last principle that I want to talk about is balancing pessimism and optimism. I tend to be a very optimistic person. But too much optimism makes you a little bit of an idealist where your ideologies might not align with the execution of how to envision that. We might feel disappointed, or we might feel discouraged, or people might not really believe in our vision just because it's too fantasized. We do need to balance optimism with a level of realism and pragmatism. Now, if we look at the other side, if you're too pessimistic about things, that actually might make you a procrastinator. That also might subject you to the state of analysis paralysis, where if you're so pessimistic about something, the idea of even executing on something is so grand in your mind where you want to keep doing more research to fully understand something, and this might not lead you to actually taking action. So the best is the balance of both worlds, where you can take action so that pessimism is not a deterrent, but as you take action, to be cautious of downfalls and risks so that you're not too much of an ideologist. Lastly, to kind of embody all the principles that I've been sharing, I think they all fall into this idea of climbing the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If you don't know what that is, I'm going to put a picture of it right here, and hopefully with some graphics explain it to you. To me, I was very particular about wanting to climb this. And for most people, even straight out of college and getting a job, you won't really have to think about this actively. However, for those of you who do not pursue a formal education, and as you pursue kind of the life experiences and gaining that employment or business that you're trying to create, let's really factor in the idea of you cannot fully develop your mindset and your ideologies and your vision and your purpose unless your food, nutrition, your basic physiological needs are met and your basic safety needs are met when it comes to shelter and the idea of love and belonging. So you have friends who are supportive, you have loved ones, your family who are supportive, and of course having a high enough self-esteem and confidence to be able to take action and get out of your comfort zone. These are all, of course, assumptions that I have made as I've been explaining to you these principles. I would highly suggest for you to make sure that these things are profound enough and stable in your life before seeking that purpose. That is not to say that if you don't have these things that you aren't able to become a millionaire. I just think that these will help facilitate and accelerate your path to becoming a millionaire. So, of course, I didn't go super into detail as far as my own finances go. However, throughout these principles, I wanted to kind of share a little bit about my experiences making my first million. If you want to look at a deeper financial picture regarding that, I'm happy to make another video to dive really deep into it. However, this video was specifically made to be informational and educational to help you, because why not? I love helping people. I love sharing my knowledge, and this is one of the formats of videos that I want to continue doing. So if you love this kind of content, and if you find this helpful, I would be more than happy to continue doing things like these. And that's pretty much a high level of some principles that have helped me navigate the challenges as I didn't know what I was doing at that time. And of course, looking back and now being in my late 20s, these principles are still things that I stick to and I think will help you tremendously make your first million. So thank you so much for watching if you've come this far, and I hope to see you guys next time.